Are members of the committee actually there behind their Hollywood Squares tiles? Senator McDonald is always present. Thank you. Senator McCormick's here.
We are live.
Great. Yeah, I've often thought if we're talking about renaming both at A&R and in this committee, it'd be environment and energy, or energy and environment. Put them together, because the energy transformation that we're undergoing is a once in a century project, and doing it right means being environmentally aware at the same time. So before we go on to your report, so I did have a question I was holding over, and let me, just in case people are going to see this as a separate video. So it's Thursday, April 15th, it's 10:19 a.m., and this is the second half of the morning session of Senate Natural Resources and Energy. We're visiting with Commissioner Michael Snyder. We often talk about this big transformation in energy going on is building a clean energy economy. Is there a comparable term in your mind for what you're seeing as an opportunity in the world, or need, opportunity/need in the world of environment, particularly as it relates to forests?
Yes,
forest health.
I think, and they're tied. I've tried to make that connection. I think there's opportunities to tie this to that energy, clean energy economy. And so to me, it's a modern forest economy, recognizing all that we've learned, all the importance, everything from Senator McCormick's concept of, some of it's just fine on its own, and that's important, to, man, we have a lot of demands of these forests. So to me, it's having forests play a significant role in our energy future, among others, in our built environment, but keeping the green in that built environment too. So to me, that's what it is. It's the modern forest economy.
Right. So another thing before we get going is, farm to plate was a model, and still healthy and robust and growing. It says, can we do value added food in the state of Vermont? Not just grow commodity crops that are basically, for the most part, exported at sort of the lowest possible price. And food is a much more intimate product than wood products. So there is a whole group of people that have actually decided, yes, they do want to buy local food. And that's, I don't know to what degree we have the same thing happening for wood products. And is there, you feel like it's happening, but it's just 10 or years behind the food revolution, if we want to call it that?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. It is happening. In fact, happening in part with great assistance of the Sustainable Jobs Fund. That has taken on a piece of the forest industry network as their work. Ellen Kaler has been very helpful in us seeing the parallels and what might be possible in terms of a strategic plan for the forest sector. I've got a pile here, I won't spare you, but of various reports and sector analyses towards this strategic plan for sustainable forest products, et cetera. It's ongoing through the work of the Working Lands Enterprise Initiative and others. I would remark that there are differences, and you reflect it. It's very intimate, your food, something you put in your body every day. People really respond to that. I'll remind you, as I like to say, remember, food is only one letter different than wood, right? And beyond, there are two forest products you put in your body every day: clean water and clean air. So there is something to get excited about here. And then there's all these other uses. So yes, it's happening. There isn't a farm to plate for forests, but we have a variety of these, frankly, too many of them, reports that say, what we need is a new market for this, and here's how we engage this group here. And I think we've all been sort of struggling is how to implement, how to actually effectuate, it's worth conversing about it further. As you're talking about looking into the next half of the session, I would encourage actually having the conversation with an Ellen Kaler from the Sustainable Jobs Fund and the Farm to Plate Network, because she's advised us on this and would tell you, she's been very helpful in seeing where the gaps are and what some of the it's an incredibly complex web of interactions.
Right.
It really challenges this thing. So
Yeah.
there's a lot there.
Sure. Well, great. That's a great idea. And to give credit where credit is due, it was my summer 2007 assignment to the Forestry Study Committee, where Ellen Kaler presented the map of the forest products network that I think had been funded by work by Senator Jeffords' office that inspired me to say, I said to Sarah Copeland Hands, sitting next to me, we need this for the world of food. We didn't use the word food system then. We had no idea who was doing what and where and what the connections were. And that first map and inventory became the springboard into Farm to Plate. So we're coming full circle.
Great.
Thank you. So onto the appendix or chapter 2. What are you looking at in terms of increased initiatives, next 1, 3, 5 years in terms of investments to make?
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity here. And on this one, I'd start with, there's this excitement for, and maybe a dizzying, head-spinning amount of conversations about the possibility, this prospect of federal money in big chunks. I don't know, I don't have any particularly detailed yet that's coming to us. I know that in H315, you have now advanced to the governor, it including a recommendation for one-time general fund investment in the VOREC community grants. This is in the outdoor recreation space, and $5 million in ARPA funding for recreational infrastructure and access improvements on public lands. So that's one piece. That's what started and got us thinking about what's possible, particularly where public lands investments are concerned, largely in the recreation context. Next, you have what you've been hearing about from Secretary Moore and others, is this next wave of ARPA funding that, by the way, that first wave of that was sort of built upon our work with CARES money last fall in doing kind of recreational improvements and fixing some overuse problems, et cetera. So we learned from that and we're building on it. The next wave does include through ACCD this $30 million there's these few buckets. I mentioned earlier, one of them is the climate bucket, if you will. And I know in there's a recommendation for 1.5 million to the CEDF, Clean Energy Development Fund, for incentivizing and furthering wood heat, advanced wood heat. So that's good. And then the other one, it's an economic development buckets. This is, what we've been asked to do is address the economic effects of the pandemic by investing in short-term recovery for more long-term stability. There's nothing per se in there for forests, forest economy, forest conservation. I think it doesn't mean it can't be. It's just not in there now per se. What's in there now, I just want to start with that I know of, is through ACCD's allotment, the proposal would bring $2.25 million to FPR and $2.25 million to Fish and Wildlife for recreational infrastructure and access improvements. And it contemplates further, that over some series of years, although years 2 and 3, I think we're still somewhat blurry and in question based on awaiting Treasury guidance, right? Eligibility criteria, timing. And I think we also want to see how we deploy these funds, what we do, what the impact is, and then be ready to adjust from there. So it's starting with this $4.5 million to ANR to be split at Fish and Wildlife and FPR for really dedicated to this recreational improvements, which I think are smart. They'll put local Vermont contractors to work for kind of short-term recovery, but then do so by investing in expansions, correcting environmental problems that may exist, and increasing access for all demographics to the public lands. Very excited about it. I think it has multiple benefits and will set us up for the economic development that comes from the recreation economy into the future. We have a backlog, so that's all really good. That said, as I say, there's nothing per se sort of earmarked, dedicated for the forest economy or forest conservation or outreach. but I think forest businesses certainly do qualify, and I'm eager to help them access the other economic recovery programs and funding that is envisioned in this round. So they're not named, but I think there's possibilities, and I'll be eager to help find folks access that funding. And then as we look forward to subsequent infrastructure, whatever else might be coming in federal assistance, I think much of what I've presented, and by the way, I hope Jude has received, I've shared the report with her now for your benefit, that we could find things in there that could access further funding. Just stepping out now broadly, I would say, to me, for some time, I've been thinking about, and now President Biden is reflecting it with his Climate Conservation Corps, Civilian Climate Corps, the sort of modern version of a CCC. Been thinking that for years, is the power and benefit. If only we had a chunk of money to invest and make public land investments and in the environment to, again, stabilize, to renovate, to innovate, all with an eye towards healthy forests, clean waters, and human use of them for recreation, for science, and for productive use beyond that. So I think there's so many possibilities is what I'm saying. And just sort of the summary is the early round here is directed and focused with some investments for the outdoor recreation piece that's connected. But I think there's plenty of opportunity to see investments beyond the outdoor recreation piece in subsequent rounds, and that other elements of my purview could benefit from this round because of as I understand it, the business assistance and grants, et cetera, at ACCD could very much help with, say, or in the brownfields category, like maybe we could, I mentioned earlier, like let's think about those places with an eye towards a modern forest economy. And maybe with that level of investment, we can reduce some of the barriers heretofore that have kept folks from coming in and saying, let's set up shop here. Sure.
Yeah, well, I can think of one opportunity we've discussed, not quite exactly in this way, but Rygate, right? We're talking about what could be co-located, what might be able to use that power generated right next door, as well as waste heat.
Exactly. That's a great example. And I think we could continue all morning into the afternoon with ideas that are possible. I think, I'm not an expert on eligibility, and I'm hearing a lot of talk about it and questions. So I don't want to get ahead of anybody, but I do see real possibilities here, and I'm hopeful. I really am. As you say, it's, I don't have the money. So nothing's coming to me just yet, but I like the idea of it being once in a lifetime, historic levels of funding, because and you're thinking of like, well, let's plan. How do we think about making good use of it? And I think there really are opportunities, including some of the things that we've outlined for you in the report.
Okay. Great. Yeah, that there is, I have to say that as much as I love the advanced wood heat, we have a lot of wood heat that's less advanced, and there are emissions associated, particulate emissions that are unhealthy, and
which is why we have change out programs and incentives
right.
to upgrade to that cleaner level. Yep.
Right. You're right, and there's no perfect solution. So,
well, I heard one scientist once say all energy forms are bad. There's just a range of less bad. There's no free lunch. Photosynthesis is the only one I can think of out there that's actually free. So everything else costs, and it's relative, right? So.
Right. Well, and you mentioned earlier, that full cost benefit accounting.
Exactly.
That we've actually in our Act 62 work with the department and the PUC asked that when energy sources are evaluated, it include a full cost benefit lifetime analysis, which I don't think it's been fully implemented yet. There's definitely work along those lines, but there are certainly plenty of fuels that get their externalized negative costs aren't assessed against them, and it makes the better choices look all the more costly.
Perfect. That's exactly right.
Okay. Any committee questions? So we have a little bit of time here before we go on to H108, and so Senator Campion brought up the idea of having some committee discussion. I don't mean that the next 10 minutes is all the committee discussion we'll have. We have several weeks left even as a morning committee. But Commissioner Snyder, you mentioned Ellen Kaler, so that seems like a great idea to me. She's been involved in this for a long time. So what I wanted to just pause and say are there to Commissioner Snyder might want to chip in some names, and members of the committee. My usual question is, what questions do we have and who do we want to hear from to get some answers?
Mr. Chair, what are you talking about though right now? Are you going back to the earlier testimony?
Yes.
I just would like to, again, my committee discussion isn't a witness list. I just think 20 minutes, 30 minutes at some point to, just discuss this as, where we're going to put it on the priority list, how we're going to move forward, all that kind of thing. I mean, I'm happy to do it now if that makes sense. But I think before witness list, I, for one, would love to pull some of this apart with my colleagues to see what direction and how we want to do it. Otherwise, I might not suggest the people that, would fit the needs of the direction everybody else is going in.
Okay.
But I mean, I'm happy to have the committee discussion now, but I think we need 20 or 30 minutes to really jump into this. I mean, I still have, some questions that I would just love to raise during a committee discussion and kind of bat this around. That's just where I'm at. Perhaps others are ready to roll.
Yeah, well, I think just trying to see if there's people that others would like to hear from.
So for me, I mean, committee discussion, I mean, I would love to, just better understand, this is not my area of expertise. We're all learning as we're going with this a little bit. I think there are questions out there. There are things that I think lay people like myself think might be solutions. And, hey, can we do this? Can we do that? I think we just need some time to talk these things through and then either have Mr. Snyder and others back in to kind of figure that out. But if you want to start a witness list, that's fine too. I'm still in the learning process myself, but others may have, be several steps ahead of me.
Well, I would say we'll do both. We'll have the committee discussion and we'll have an opportunity to hear from some people. It's not that we need to develop a bill right now, but we might want to broaden our perspective. So, all right. So if there are no more questions any other questions for Commissioner Snyder, Senator Westman, Senator McDonald.
No, it's been illuminating.
And Senator Westman?
And this is probably not really a question as much as following a little up on what Senator Campion is talking about. We have reached a point where we're losing forest. But underneath all of that, and it does somewhat affect current use, but it also affects, more importantly, the management of forest lands. The land is being broken up into smaller and smaller chunks. It's quite easy to manage, or much easier to manage a piece of forest that's a couple hundred acres or above. But when you start breaking something down into 30 acres, and even though it is maintained in current use, it's much harder to get a full load of logs. It's much harder to manage that piece of land. And underneath us, and underneath the whole state, our forest lands are becoming harder to manage, and we've turned the corner and we're losing forest lands. That's something that we really need to talk about, and not talk about in just a brief passing by moment. We've hit a watershed where we're losing forest, and the land that's out there is being broken up into smaller and smaller pieces, which makes it harder to manage. And what are the consequences from that? And I think we know what the consequences are in pieces, but nobody is stating the case around that. We're at a watershed moment, and we've headed the other direction. What do we think?
Yeah, no, thank you for that. If I could just add to that, Mr. Chair, and that's why I'd rather get into some good committee discussion and questions before just adding folks. I'm sure they'd be great to the witness list, because I'm still figuring out what I need to ask and who I need to ask that of.
Okay. Well, I think one of the it's probably like our 7th year running now. We've been having conversations about forest fragmentation. So turning parcels into smaller and smaller parcels, as well as seeing some loss of land through conversion.
Well, environmentally, what that means is if our forests are filtered to filter out the pollutants that we keep putting in the air, what does that all mean?
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Senator Bray, if I could, may I make
Yes,
a
please.
final comment, especially given the Senator Campion's and Westman's last remarks? I mean, I agree. And that's kind of what I was trying to say is, we've been at this, we have identified it. We don't need to, I think we've well established what the threats are, what the drivers are, and what the implications are. Like Senator Westman's saying, the problems that this, that it brings. I want to speak specifically to forest fragmentation legislation. Wrote that report back in 2015, eagerly tried to help along the way. I'm on the record supporting particularly the most recently partially passed proposal for valuing and protecting forest blocks and connecting habitats. And I'm not changing that. And I hope we get there in the right way at the right time, for sure. And I would here's the comment. That is helpful. It is not uniquely and fully helpful. It is not the end of our work, even if and when you get that through. The point is that it's helpful because it's important and it's a mechanism, but it doesn't actually get at the root causes. And so I'll leave you with this thought. If I'm thinking about my forest land and its fate, and I'm all the way to the zoning board, then it's too late. This conversation needs to happen at my kitchen table. What are my options? If I'm already gone to that degree where I'm contemplating subdivision and development, and then I run up against the fragmentation criteria, that will change it. And that's good. But I don't think we've gotten at the actual problem with that solution. It's a partial solution. And as you know, I support it, but it's not enough. And that's the big point here is that and the way I would phrase it is, that's at the zoning board. It's too late. I need to be intercepted at my kitchen table as I make these decisions about my family, my resources, my abilities, my needs, and what my options are. And we need to have more options. That's what this report is about. Thanks again for the invitation, for your awareness and your interest in this, historically important stuff. And I do think we're at a moment in time where we may have a chance to not only the big chance to get it right and make some key decisions in a comprehensive, integrated way, but perhaps with this funding as a nudge. So I really do appreciate your thinking of it and inviting me in to consider all this and the chance to kick it around.
Yeah.
But I just want to leave you with the thought of root causes. And it's not going to be fixed by sort of one piece, as important as
Sure.
that piece is.
Right. I mean, I think I would agree. The forest frag and road rule were changing a trigger for review and then saying, once you undertake the review, let's be more thoughtful about minimizing, forest impacts, habitat connector impacts. But it's the horse is out of the barn by then. It's, we didn't get to you at your kitchen table. So are you seeing this principally as an economics issue? The landowner says, for whatever reason, because of an opportunity to sort of cash in, that sounds crass, but for some people it is an investment, right? For others, it's like it's unacceptably expensive for them to maintain in their family.
I do. It's a lot of things. I've referenced the sort of awareness gap, the cultural malaise, if you will. Ultimately it's economics. That's the driver. That's what we've found. That's what we hear from people. That's the reality of their decision making. Most of these people would prefer to keep it intact. They love it, most of them. And we need to make it possible for them to do so. And that's most impactful there would be an economic revision.
Right. Well, we've talked about, and it's been in the offing, ecosystem services, right? If the forest is the lungs and the kidney of the planet, clean water, clean air, then you might want to put a figure on that and pay for that.
That's right. We all benefit. And because there's no transplant, to push the metaphor, that's not an option.
Right. Okay. All right. Well, thank you to Senator Westman and Campion for sort of pushing that conversation along. And so we'll set aside committee time next week to have a deeper discussion about it. And then based on that discussion, we'll figure out if we want to hear from people this year or not, and who those people might be. Okay. So with that, if there's no further discussion on this or any questions or comments from anyone here, we'll wrap up on forestry, forest parks and recreation for the morning. So thank you, Commissioner Snyder.
Thank you again.
So committee, that brings us back on our schedule to H108, an act relating to Vermont standards for issuing a Clean Water Act Section 401 certification. There's nothing like putting something on the calendar for committee discussion and possible vote to stimulate emails. So I have received emails from Warren Coleman asking for clarifications. I'm going to have to schedule in some people to get those. I'd say it's related to whether or not on energy projects where there's FERC assessments already required, whether that will satisfy the need for an alternatives analysis that a Section 401 review would require. So we just need to get clarification from the department, and it'd probably be good to bring in an interested party that wants to ensure that that is the case. And then I received from Michelle Boomhauer this morning a note that AOT has some concern related to 108. It was unspecified, so we'll schedule in someone from VTrans to hear on that. I've already requested that they give us a name and then we'll schedule them. So we won't vote out 108 today. And because this happened on the cusp of meeting on this, we didn't have there was no chance to get those people scheduled in. So with that, the next thing we have is, I believe, Jude, you have the most current agenda because we've been adding things as the morning went on. What time is Senator Benning due in on the Adirondack?
11:15.
11:15. Okay. So committee, I think then, unless someone wants to bring up something now for discussion, we can take a break till 11:15. We'll hear from Senator Benning on that Adirondack, why institutions made the recommendation they did. And I've also asked Mr. O'Grady to come back in, and Jude, he is available and be able to join us. Is that right?
Yes, at 11:15. I told him 15 minutes. I hope that's okay, because he's in
Great.
ag right now.
Okay, great. So we'll have a chance to check in on the legal basis, which I think was actually part of what institutions, well, we'll let Senator Benning speak for himself. He'll be here shortly. So with that, unless there's anything else someone wants to do, I know people have more than one iron in the fire these days. So we'll have a break until, let's come back a minute or two before 11:15, because we have a pretty tight schedule to with Senator Benning and with Mr. O'Grady. And then we'll wrap after that for the morning. Okay, thank you, everyone. See you 11:14.
Senator, I'm reminding you that you invited Sue Minter and her group in at 11:30 or 11:25, 11:30 today. So we won't wrap up after Senator Benning.